sinners, and saints. Dust off those horns and halos. It's time for Alan After Dark.
Oh, sinners and saints and bitches and taints. So sorry. I apparently just nodded off to sleep there for a second. No, not because I'm high or drunk or anything. I guess I'm just, I don't know, fucked up on life. If you believe that, I got some swampland in Florida to sell you. Or maybe some of Ron DeSantis' high heel shoes. You might want those. God knows I wouldn't want them. Did you hear what that bitch did? Passed some kind of law preventing cities from using rainbow-colored lights on the bridges during Pride Month? Isn't that some shit? You can only light up bridges with the colors of red, white, and blue. Bless his heart. Maybe he should go to more of like a 5-inch boot heel. Maybe then he'll feel like a man. You think? Do I really give a fuck about him? Well, I wouldn't if he wasn't a governor in a U.S. state, but, you know, at least he's not going to be president. God damn. That'd be the biggest pile of shit administration ever, wouldn't it? But anyway, how y'all doing? You feeling well? You feeling sexy? You looking good? You feeling fabulous? Enjoying Pride Month so far? I hope you are. I'm going to be getting ready for happy hour for this evening, but I don't know why I dozed off to sleep there. You'd swear I must have been having a good time. But it's just kind of one of those weeks. It's been a shitty ass week. I've had all kinds of issues. Somebody tried to call me out over a stupid thing, and she said something to the effect of, well, who do you think you are? And I said, bitch, I'm Madonna. And she thought she had a comeback when she replied, who? And I said, it's Britney, bitch. When she said, who? Again, I realized she wasn't trying to get me. She just didn't have a clue who I was talking about. Maybe I shouldn't be picking fights with 90-year-old women. That might be a good start, right? But what's that old saying from The Breakfast Club? You mess with the bull, you're going to get the horns? Can I have Henry Cavill's horn?
Yee-haw.
I'm debating on what to wear to happy hour tonight, too. Do I go more theme-oriented, like a cowboy or leather dude? Or do I just go dressed in my Tennessee Vols orange? Or what are you wearing to happy hour? Are you going to happy hour? What do you got planned for tonight? I'm just curious. Let me know. I guess I'm fixating too much on happy hour instead of getting the show started, right? I guess I'm acting so out of whack tonight because I am frustrated. You know, I spent this week doing some self-reflecting on my life and my personality. Now, I am the first one to say that you should never have any regrets. Yes, we all make mistakes. We all have learning experiences. We all have bad relationships. We have breakups. We have hurt feelings sometimes. None of those things should be a life sentence. You shouldn't be punishing yourself forever for all the bullshit you've done. But for some reason, it feels like I am being punished for things that I'm not even sure that I did. Did that make any sense at all? It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, how is it that you are really close with someone and then suddenly they just stop speaking to you? They won't even look in your directions. They won't come to you and say, hey, I've got this problem. You won't tell me what I did, if I did anything. I think this is how ghosting feels, isn't it? But it makes me wonder about myself. You know, I am a person who speaks his mind without hesitation, and sometimes my mouth gets me in trouble. I'm kind of surprised that I haven't gotten in more trouble with the podcast. I have lost a couple of friends over the podcast. They were so arrogant to think that I was talking about them, and when I clarified that I wasn't talking about them, it seemed to make them even angrier. I felt like I couldn't win for losing. But I started to think, do I really have a toxic personality? Am I a person who isn't sensitive enough to other people's feelings? I've never wanted to be a person who uses the truth as a weapon, and I know people who do that. I've said it before. I'm no angel, and I could never profess to be one. I think as I've gotten older, I'm more courteous with my words, but sometimes I feel like the direct approach is the correct approach. I've always said, too, that if you ask me a question, expect a true answer from me. I'm not going to sugarcoat it if you ask me that way, but I'll try my best to make it as gentle as possible if it's something harsh that I need to say. Is it really true then? I think there is some truth to the notion that most people don't really want the truth. They don't want you to tell them something that they don't want to hear. They want us to say, oh no, it's not you, it's not this, it's not that. It's not your fault that you broke up, even though it was you that was having 3 affairs on the side. It's not your fault that they're angry at you because you didn't tell them you had herpes. But why do you ask someone for the truth if you don't want it? Let's take a trip back in time to when I did something with someone, but I got all the blame. What's funny there is I implied that this only happened once, but what I'm getting at is that it happened over and over and over again. When something bad happens, somebody has to take the blame. And have you noticed how a lot of times the person that gets blamed isn't really the person that's really responsible? I find that fascinating. I had been seeing this guy, and it was a little bit hot and heavy for about 12 seconds, and we kind of realized that we should just be friends. And we did stay friends. I would see him out at the club, and we would talk and have a good time, but I was hooking up with other guys, and he was finding his latest boyfriend. Well, one night, he brings a guy in from where he worked, and when I saw him, I was like, holy crap, he is hot as fuck. Let's call him John. John was a 6'3", dark-headed, blue-eyed guy with not as thick as, but almost like a Tom Selleck mustache, just not that thick. Thankfully, he shaved it later on, but he still looked hot either way. I went to my friend and I said, hey, who was that? And he said, well, this is John, who I work with. And he kind of hinted to me that he wanted to come to a gay bar, and I said I would go with him. I've mentioned that the club Carousel, it had a sunk-in dance floor, and it had a railing around 3 sides. So people could be having a drink, leaning against the railing, and watching people dance. Well, when I was on the dance floor, I would do my best to make eye contact with the hot guys to see if they were interested. Well, John was the hot guy that night. He was planted on that railing, almost afraid to move, it seemed. And I would try to get his attention, and he just was looking straight ahead. He was absolutely petrified. And I had sympathy for that. I did. And finally, I decided to just go up and say hello to him and make some casual conversation. And he was courteous. He was petrified. Every time I said a word to him, he would look around the room to see if anybody he knew was going to show up and, I guess, out him to the world, his church, his mother, everyone, his work. Even though the place he worked, about 85% of the guys that worked there were pole smokers. John started coming in to the club, usually on Friday nights. He started to become more comfortable, and he and I did really strike up a friendship, even though I totally had the hots for him. One time, one of my coworkers at my office, her sister came in for a visit, and she told me, we're going out to that country bar and dance club, and why don't you invite your new friend, John, to come with you, and we all hang out there. And I said, yeah, I will. And he said yes. So Saturday night, we're all out there having a good time. He comes in, and my friend's sister, we'll call her Sheila, she leaned in and whispered to me. She said, this John guy, you have feelings for him. And I was like, no, I don't. I really don't. I just find him really hot and attractive. And she says, no, it's more than that. And I was like, well, okay, whatever. Maybe I do have more than just an attraction to him. And she says, well, then what's the problem? I was like, well, he doesn't seem to even be aware that I'm interested in him that way. I can't get him to think past us being friends. And she leaned in and she said, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. If you really want him, get him in bed one time, fuck his brains out, and then pretend like he doesn't exist. If you do that, he'll be wrapped around your finger. And I said, well, no, that sounds like I'm playing games with him, and I really don't want to play games. And she was like, all right, but if you really want him and you want something long term, do that and you'll get him. Well, I always kept that in mind, but I had no intention of doing it. We stayed friends, and the company I worked for, we had a client that had a cabin in the mountains, and he would offer it to us. You just had to call ahead and you could schedule it for a weekend, and you got it for free. So I thought, well, maybe that's what I should do. We should go away together. We'll spend a weekend and we'll see how it goes. So I invited him and he said yes. And I remember that so well. So we go to the cabin up in the mountains, and it was near a really touristy resort type town. So we went up on a Friday night and we spent all day Saturday and Sunday. Well, on Saturday, we went into the town just to look around and enjoy the atmosphere. And we were in the store looking at like little souvenirs, trinkets and things. And a guy that worked there, we read each other right away. He recognized us as gay, and he starts talking to us. And he says to us, so you're a couple? And John immediately, oh, no. We're just really good friends. And the guy's like, oh, well, and basically pushed me out of the way. And I was like, well, I guess that's my answer right there. So kind of gave up on it. We enjoyed the day, went back to the cabin, watched some TV, and wound up falling asleep on 2 different couches. The next day, we come back home. I drop him off. I come on home disappointed, thinking, well, I guess we're just going to be friends. Especially when I learned the following week that when we got home, he changed clothes, took a bath, and went straight out to the club that night. I was like, well, damn. Years pass, and we kind of drift in and out of each other's lives. We're just friends, and we do have dinner on occasion. Well, he meets a man, and they wind up moving in together. And I was invited to their home. They invited me to dinner. I enjoyed talking with his partner, his boyfriend, sometimes to the point where I think John felt like he was left out of some of our conversations. Anyway, that kind of ebbed and flowed for years. And one night we went to dinner, and he decided that he wanted to go to a movie, and he asked me if I'd go with him. And I was like, sure. So we go, and before the movie started, it was just simple chat. And I could tell that he had something on his mind, but I couldn't figure out what. So the movie starts, and we're sitting side by side. You know, we're not like these uptight straight guys who put a seat between them because they're afraid people will see them sitting side by side, and it's supposed to mean something. I don't know what the fuck it's supposed to, but you know. Well, suddenly I just reached over and took his hand, and he took mine. And we were just holding hands throughout the movie. And after the movie was over, we go out to the parking lot, you know, and we just kind of chat for a little bit and say our goodbyes. And I kind of wanted to apologize for holding his hand because I thought it made him uncomfortable. And he said, no, it's kind of nice to have somebody touch me after all these years. And I'm like, what? And he just said, well, he doesn't touch me very much anymore. I'm like, oh, well, I'm sorry. So after that, we kind of started having dinner like once a week. We'd go to the movies sometimes, but mostly dinner. And we went out to a chain restaurant, you know, one of those cliched ones. And it was a special happy hour night there. And unfortunately, we got a little tipsy. When we were leaving, we were still chatting outside in the parking lot, and it was a dark section of the parking lot. He says, why don't you sit down in the car with me? And I did. And I don't know I can't remember the leap from that conversation, but it went from talking to blowjob just like that. And after we were finished, I could tell that he was so bothered by it that I just didn't say much else. I just said, well, have a good night. I had fun. Call me or text me tomorrow. And he says, okay, I will. And I thought, well, that's that. We've done this. We've cheated, and this will be over. Well, it wasn't. For some time after that, we continued to go out to eat, occasional blowjob, and it seemed to be fine. Well, the Supreme Court legalizes same-sex marriage, and he tells me that they're going to get married. And I'm like, that's great, wonderful. My company at the time, I was on business travel. I was spending a lot of time in California, and I'd already told him that the odds of me being able to come to the wedding would be slim to none because of my trips to California, but I wished them well, of course. And I thought that was good enough. I did receive an invitation, but I did not respond to it. I didn't send a reply back because of our discussion at dinner before. We had dinner again before they were to get married, and he said, well, I haven't heard from you about the wedding. And I was like, well, yeah, because I'm doing business travel. I won't be able to make it. And he was like, oh, okay. And I thought that was it. So time passes. We don't have much time to spend with each other. He's now a newlywed, happily married. And one night I'm at happy hour and I'm a little tipsy, and I text him. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? You wearing those sexy jeans you have? And he texted back, you've really screwed up this time. And I'm like, what the hell? And I was like, what are you talking about? This is all in text, by the way, not conversation, text. And he said, you didn't come to the wedding. And I told him, and I was furious. I was like, but I told you over and over. He says, yeah, but you didn't reply to the invitation. You could have RSVP'd. And I'm like, well, I told you. He says, after I drug it out of you. And I'm like, you don't seem to remember that I told you before you even sent the invitation that I probably wouldn't be able to make it because of my business travel. Didn't matter. It was all my fault, and that was that. Well, I noticed then that he had unfriended me and blocked me on all social media and everything else. And I'm like, this is because I didn't manually mail that RSVP back. That's why. And he says, well, it meant a lot to me. And I'm like, did it? He stopped talking to me. So I got to thinking, is it because me not being there implied something? It affected his guilt over getting married, even though he and I had been fooling around for years during his relationship. And that with me not there, supposedly being the best friend, even though I was on business travel, apparently his new husband found that kind of odd and peculiar. Anyway, I just told him, I said, well, here's the deal. What if it was supposed to be me and you that were getting married and not you and him? And he kind of understood that, I thought, and it really hurt my feelings. And I'm like, I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just thought that me verbalizing to you that I couldn't probably make it was enough to do it. Anyway, I thought we made amends over it, and he said he could accept that apology. And we become friends again on social media. We were still talking a little bit. And then out of the blue one night, I realized that I wasn't seeing any of his posts. And he, once again, had unfriended me and blocked me and everything else. And we've never spoken since. For a year after that, I blamed myself. I'm like, it must be me that caused all this trouble. It must be me every time a friendship ends, a relationship ends. It must be always me. It must be my personality. I must not be able to read any of this right. And I kicked myself. And I'm kicking myself tonight, thinking that with this latest friendship that seems to be over, that I must have some kind of toxic trait that I don't even realize myself that angers, bothers, or hurts people. You know what? I bet Freud is not rolling over in his grave. I bet he's having a damn party, laughing his ass off at somebody like me. I am probably a case study for his theories. I guess I do sound like someone who's toxic, don't I? Do I really use the truth as a weapon? I've never been a gossip monger that takes information and gives it to someone just to hurt them. I do, though, remember when a guy that I was crazy about he was dating someone who had broke up with him. And I did show him that his ex was now a porn star, but I wanted to tell him before he got blindsided by somebody else. I think he didn't forgive me for telling him, but I honestly wasn't trying to hurt him. I was trying to prepare him for the bitches that we all know that would try to rub it in and make fun of him. I guess now that I think about it, he considers me one of those bitches, right? Hear me out here just for a second or two. Isn't it possible that this is just my personality? This is just who I am? And I'm not trying to justify bad behavior or being a fork-tongued bitch, a snake in the grass. But what if it's just me? You know, personalities are unique, every single one of us, even though we do seem to fall into certain types of behavioral patterns. Maybe I just fit into one of those categories of personality. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm always trying to mean well. It just doesn't turn out that way every time. But then again, maybe in this situation, this was their way of getting out of our relationship. Maybe they were using that as an excuse, a reason to end our friendship, our relationship. I guess that's why we need therapy and vodka. Thank you for joining me for this wacky episode of Alan After Dark. I hope you've had fun and have been entertained, and maybe I provoked you to do some self-reflecting yourself. Remember, take life by the balls and be real. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.